Hello, my name is John Sherman, and I'm talking to you from Cape Cod, Massachusetts on October 7, 2020. I've been asked to give you some advice on how you might find work in the field of business and human rights. This is a field that I've been involved in heavily for the last 15 years, as I'll explain. But when I graduated law school in 1972, the field didn't exist, and my involvement in it came much later. Look, I don't think that there's any one way to become a business and human rights lawyer, but I'll tell you how I got here and let you take from that what you want. Over my career, I've had many different legal jobs: a law clerk to a federal judge, a litigator in a private law firm, an in-house counsel for an international energy company, leadership positions in the International Bar Association, senior legal counsel to Professor John Ruggie, the author of the 2011 UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, when he was special representative to the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Now, currently, I'm general counsel and senior advisor to SHIFT, which is an independent nonprofit organization headquartered in New York with staff in the United States and Canada and Europe. It's a small organization, but it is the world's leading center of expertise on implementing the UN Guiding Principles, which are the authoritative global standard on the subject, and it is chaired by Professor Ruggie. As I said, I graduated law school in 1972. My first job was clerk to a federal judge in Atlanta, Georgia. I went from there to a law firm in Boston, Massachusetts, where I practiced commercial litigation. After that, I joined the legal department of a regional electric utility company, which was later acquired by National Grid, based in the UK. During my time at the company, I had a number of responsibilities, such as litigation, environmental law, health and safety law, ethics and compliance, and enterprise risk management. And these were both legal and non-legal duties. Now, towards the end of my tenure at National Grid, the company was involved in a number of very serious accidents in which people died. And naturally, this made us question how well we were managing our safety, and also made me question the role that I played as a lawyer in helping it do so. Now, from the start, when I graduated law school, I believed that it was the role of lawyers to help make the world a better place for people to live in. And to do so, it's critically important that companies behave within the boundaries of the law. However, acting legally doesn't always prevent companies from harming people, and it does not always enable them to help make people whole after they're harmed. When accidents occur, the tendency of a business is to circle the wagons and assert its legal defenses to liability. However, advice based on a narrow and technical reading of the law tends to enable companies to avoid thinking about the risks of harm to people and to avoid doing much to identify, address, and remedy that kind of harm. That's not intentional, but it's founded on beliefs that society benefits the most when companies are left to their own devices, and that the role of lawyers is only to do what the client asks them to do without asking whether this will harm people. That's contrary to my personal values and beliefs. Now, over time, I've learned that there are three kinds of business lawyers. The first is an expert on technical legal compliance, and the expert tells the client what it can do and what it cannot do under the law and helps the client stay out of legal trouble. That was the role that I played mostly after law school in the first 10 or 15 years of my legal practice, where I was trying very hard to master the details of the law and how to practice it. Now, this technical legal skill is critically important for business and human rights, since the responsibility to respect human rights by businesses is grounded on adherence to the rule of law. If companies don't get the right technical legal advice, the rule of law will be undermined. But as I said, adherence to the law is not enough. So this leads me to the second kind of business lawyer, and that is a wise counselor. A wise counselor advises the client not only what it can and cannot do, but also on what it should do. Now, I first learned to become this kind of lawyer when I began to work as an inside company counsel. Why? Because my clients expected it. Wise counselors tend to see generally accepted ethical principles, that is soft law, as a leading indicator of what the law will be tomorrow, that is hard law. As a result, they're well positioned to advise business clients on whether to adopt a soft law norms, such as the UN Guiding Principles. And I relied heavily on this role when I began to work in business and human rights in 2005, and started to advise my company, and later others, on why they should behave with respect for human rights, even when doing so wasn't strictly compelled by the law. Which leads me to the third kind of lawyer, the third kind of role that business lawyers play. Now, as I mentioned, lawyers, including myself, typically, and those who work in companies, often acquire significant business responsibilities where law and business overlaps. So in my company, I had executive responsibility in several areas, such as occupational health and safety in the environment, business ethics and ethics in enterprise risk management. And by the way, I point out this is one reason why so many U.S. lawyers have become company executives. Now, in addition to being wise counselors or leaders within their companies, they can be leaders within their profession. I began to exercise leadership in the International Bar Association shortly after I got involved in business and human rights for my company. In 2005, I became chair of the IBA's Corporate Social Responsibility Committee, and there I helped to secure the IBA's strong engagement in and support for Professor Ruggi's 2008 Protect, Respect, and Remedy framework, and then in his 2011 Guiding Principles, which implemented the framework. I worked very closely with Professor Ruggi to convince skeptical business lawyers of the need to pay attention to human rights. And later, I became chair of an IBA working group that developed practical guidance for business lawyers on integrating the guiding principles into their legal practice, and got the endorsement of all of the IBA's members, which consist of not only 70,000 or so individual practitioners, but 200 bar associations around the world. So, looking back on my nearly 50 years as a lawyer, the UN Guiding Principles helped me to integrate and understand the relationship of the three roles of business lawyers: technical expert, wise counselor, and leader. And I wasn't at the time really aware of what role I was playing because they all tended to overlap and only become clear in hindsight. So in order to practice law as a business lawyer with respect for human rights, you have to be prepared to play each role when it's acquired. That is, to show clients how to act legally, to advise clients that they must consider harm to people as a factor that should temper the rigid application of the law, And 3, to take a role in one's bar association or law society to show your colleagues why this is the right thing to do. So here's a lesson that I draw from my business, from my business and legal experience that you might find useful. One way to become a business and human rights lawyer, but hardly the only way, is to first become a technical expert on the law, what it means and how it applies. And then when you get good at it, leverage your practical experience to gain the trust of your clients to the point that you're able to advise them not only on what they must do, but on what they must and should do to avoid harming people. Finally, you can leverage this to become active in your professional associations to advocate that your colleagues integrate respect for human rights in their practice. And last, above all, recognize that no matter what role you play as a lawyer, you are much more than an amoral adjutant to your business client. You got into the profession with personal ethical values that you should never surrender and never be afraid of voicing them. At the end of the day, your client will thank you. Thanks for listening.